Jamie, I have wanted you to come on my podcast for a very long time, so I'm glad that you're here, and I've managed to drag you all the way to Shrewsbury as well for the pleasure.
Oh, the drive was lovely, and the shows. I really like the show. It's quaint, and it feels like it's full of real gardeners, which I think is really nice.
Yes. We have had so many conversations with people just stopping and chatting just about plants, and that's what these shows are all about, isn't it?
I think getting people interested in and learning, take-home advice is great from smaller shows. They've got some amazing kind of small borders over there and small gardens. There's an Aloha garden that is phenomenal. I think everybody should go and check that out. It's kind of sponsored as well by Surfers Against Sewage, who I've been a member for years now, and it's starting to get some traction. You know, the pollution of the ocean and rivers, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
So they get my vote. I don't think there's a voting system, but they would get my vote. If there was a people's choice, they'd be winning it for me.
Brilliant. So for anyone who doesn't know you, introduce yourself. Give us the elevator pitch to who you are and what you do.
So my name's Jamie Langlands. I'm a garden designer, I suppose. I have been designing gardens for about 15 years. I started as a fine artist and then kind of ended up painting a lot of landscapes and plants, and then kind of fell into garden design. I worked on a vineyard looking after grapevines for a long period of time. I was really interested in creating green spaces. And in the last 15 years, I've been lucky enough to do, 12 show gardens, I think.
Yeah.
Which has been great, culminating in Chelsea Flower Show last year with Task and David Harbour, which was wonderful. Like every fine artist, and like my dad told me, what are you going to do after you finish? Like, how do you make a career in fine art? And it's very difficult to make a career if you're just trying to sell paintings or your artwork. So I finished there, and I bumbled into working on a dockyard building boats for a few years, and actually I really enjoyed it. I loved being on the water. I grew up on the sea essentially, and I was quite happy. And I remember one day this guy goes, I was just like you when I started, and now I've been here 40 years. And I was like, that day, I was like, I quit.
Yeah.
I quit, and I went to Kingston Morwood College and said I want to be a garden designer. I'd always been interested in horticulture and designing green spaces, and they said, "What do you know about plants?" And I said, "Nothing." And they were like, "Well, you need to learn about plants, not about garden design." And it was the single most important piece of advice that I was ever given, really. So I did the course, did my RHS level 2, did an NCH in horticulture. I did my chainsaw license and a spraying license as well for some reason.
Get it all done at the same time.
I just smashed it all out in a year. And then I kind of started my own business straight afterwards, doing friends and family's gardens. And then I got a job working on the vineyard, looking after 36,000 grapevines, which I loved. I had a little shepherd's cottage.
Yeah, that sounds really nice.
It was
gorgeous. Just stayed there.
It was amazing.
Amazing.
I mean, pruning 36,000 grapevines is a lot.
Okay, maybe not that part.
But it was such a beautiful job down in Dorset, and I really loved. It was very solitary, but in the winter I absolutely loved being up there, kind of by myself and just being with the plants. And last year, actually, the vineyard Langlands estate won the best sparkling wine in the world. So I'm not saying that's because of my pruning, but it's a great English sparkling wine, which is wonderful. And then my wife, who's from Oxford, was moving back from Manchester to Oxford, and I decided to move up there. I'm very spontaneous when it comes to kind of changing like big decisions. I'll just kind of go, right, I'm doing that now.
Yeah.
So I moved up there, found a job at a local landscaping company that wanted to start doing design. They they gave me a chance, and then the rest, they did a first show at Blenheim Palace Flower Show, and then we kind of just kept going from there and there really. And then now we're nearly 15 years of designing gardens, which is pretty mental when I think about it.
That is mad, yeah. And what is your core sort of design principles? What really matters to you when you're designing gardens?
I think for many years it's become very fashionable, and I think that's a whole nother topic that we can talk about, but we've been working really closely, or have been working very closely with the Wildlife Trust. So bringing wildlife into a garden is for me kind of a core function of a garden, and I implement that into clients' gardens whether they ask for it or not. You know, sometimes we'll introduce some form of wildlife habitat that's missing from their garden, and a couple of years later they'll go, "Oh my God, I didn't realize there was a bat box that you put in our garden. Did you put it there?" And we're like, "Yeah, we do that as standard." You know, because the more wildlife you've got in your garden, the healthier your garden's going to be, and the better it's going to look. So that's one. And then we've been working really closely with architects like Charlie Luxton on creating more sustainable green spaces. So limiting the impact that we have on the land. I think that gardens should be of the land and from the land. So looking at the materials we use, where they come from in the world, is a massive impact. We have some amazing materials in this country, things like Portland stone that have built London. You know, London is built from Portland stone, and yes, it's more expensive, but it's less expensive on the land, and that's a price that we can't afford to keep paying. So working with kind of industry leaders in sustainability, whether they're architects, artists, or horticulturalists or landscapers, I think is vital in how we can improve not just the little green postage stamps on the back of our house, but the wider green landscape.
And how has 15 years has just flown past in how you tell that story? But what have been the highlights for you in that time? You mentioned the show gardens that you've done there as well. What would be the highlights for you over those 15 years?
I mean, there's been a lot. I mean, the first garden that I ever created, I recently saw it actually, and it's thriving now. It's still doing great. So there's a million little highlights, but last year we created the Wilder Spaces Garden with the Wildlife Trust at RHS Malvern, and it was a bit of a turning point for me of how I see show gardens specifically, but you know, residential or public gardens as well. We created a show garden specifically that had no concrete, no cement. We had a 6-ton building that used no foundations. It was all on ground screws. We created a huge amount of varied habitats for a whole host of creepy crawlies, not just kind of the big ones like pollinators, but also larval plants or larval insects that kind of we always talk about pollinators being they're like pop style pollinators, right? But larval plants, without larval plants or host larval plants, you won't have any pollinators. So they're just as vitally important, probably just not as cool as pollinators. So we created this really wonderful space, again in conjunction with Charlie Luxton and the Wildlife Trust, and specifically Buckinghamshire, Berkshire and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust. And we were lucky enough to get a gold Best in Show, Best Construction and the People's Choice Award, which was you know, we worked with such a wonderful team. It was such a huge team effort, and everybody was really invested in what we were trying to do, so it became really easy. So that was a huge career highlight, my first RHS gold medal, and to do something that had only ever been done once in RHS history before was pretty wonderful. So there's some horrible video of me crying. It was raining quite heavily, so I think it was just from the rain, of me getting my medal, which I'd always wanted. So it took me 3 attempts. So that's probably my career high.
Yeah. And then what have you done this year? Because you've had a busy year. Basically every show I've been at, you've been there doing something. So talk me through this year and what you've been up to.
We got asked by the RHS and the Malvern show team to do a feature garden at Malvern this year. And we kind of wanted to step away from doing something really serious and try and inject a bit of fun into gardening. I think, fundamentally, gardening should be fun. It should make people smile.
Yeah.
And quite often at RHS shows, it can be a really daunting and really serious kind of thing you're trying to do. Trying to win an RHS medal is not an easy task, and it can be quite scary and quite serious. So we thought we're going to do something fun, and we created this space that was open to the public. There was a ping pong table. There was a polytunnel with a disco ball in and a smoke machine and house plants. There was a DJ stage with a boat for a roof.
It was so cool. There was so much
there was
stuff
a bar.
going on.
I mean, it was bonkers, but it was actually a hugely proud moment for me, like seeing people just come in and smile, and we got really good feedback. People were using it to jeez.
The rain's coming now.
Yeah. People were using it to chill out and enjoy the music. We had an amazing DJ in there, so it was nice to have a change of pace, and not have the pressure of being judged. That was really wonderful. But whilst that was being built, I'd also designed and in the process of building a main avenue trade stand at Chelsea this year for David Harbour with Task and Rupert Keys, which was my first time ever designing something at Chelsea Flower Show. I'd worked there for the last couple of years with Paul Harvey Brooks, a good friend of mine. But it was the first time I had ever designed and built something there, and that was a huge challenge. And so kind of another career goal of mine was to do something at Chelsea.
Yeah.
It went really well. I think we created something that was really interesting. All the plants were peat free. They were pesticide, herbicide free. We again used limited concrete. Everything was reclaimed on the garden as well. And we ended up getting 5 stars, which was the top award. So we had a busy start to the year. We tried to have a little break after that. But I think it's a really addictive industry.
Sport, isn't it?
It is. So once you've done one, stuff. You just want to keep going.
Yeah.
So that's been a busy year. We're looking forward to next year now, I suppose.
And you mentioned there about making horticulture fun, and I think that is really important. And we were already chatting earlier before we even started recording about young people in horticulture and the role of things like shows and social media and everything into getting people into horticulture from a younger age. And you think that's quite important, don't you?
I think getting younger people involved in horticulture is vital. I think the more we can educate younger people, the more they understand horticulture and nature, the more they understand it, the more likely they are to protect it. And I think we have a real responsibility to pass on our knowledge to younger people, to make sure that, in 100 years, in 200 years, that they have the same enjoyment that we gather from being in nature. And I think it's a really tricky thing to do. I was saying earlier that, when you're really young, growing things like nasturtiums or sunflowers or sweet peas, kids are really interested in that. And then you kind of, maybe you buy your own house in your 30s and you kind of buy a load of house plants, and then maybe that can gravitate to more outside gardening. And I think that's great, but there seems to be a little bit of disconnect between the real young people and kind of young adults. And I think, like I said, the more we can get people interested, the more they're going to protect nature. And I think that's really vital. So we try and make things like the garden that we did this year at Malvern, we try and make it fun. There was the obvious, there was a DJ booth, there was a ping pong table, there was a disco ball with a smoke machine. That was really just to draw people in and start seeing the serious message that was beyond it. There were reclaimed oil drums that we were growing vegetables in. We had kale and nasturtiums and sweet peas again, and broad beans and peas. And lettuce, and there were habitats built into all the planting. So actually, the deeper you looked, you started having fun. Then you were like, oh, I wonder why those stack of secondhand tiles are in there, and they're vital habitats for small mammals.
Yeah.
And we were kind of educating younger people in in a fun way to help them understand why it's important in doing that. And I think flower shows and horticultural shows have a real responsibility of trying to help younger people understand why it's important, but making it fun is the easiest way to do that.
Yeah, and it's been refreshing to see that things like your garden and the stuff that you did at Malvern, and also things like the RHS Urban Show, and and they particularly have made a bit of a move in this direction over the last year, which is refreshing to see. I think there's so much further, obviously, we could go with getting young people, but in particular that middle gap into horticulture more. But it's nice to see that people are starting to think about that a bit more.
I think the perception of gardening has changed in the last kind of 20, 30 years.
Well, you were saying earlier that when you kind of started, it was not cool, right?
No, most certainly. When I kind of told my friends that I was going to go and do gardening or horticulture, they were like, "That's not very cool, Jamie."
Yeah.
And I think that's changed. I think it's changed because our understanding of how we're looking after the planet has changed. I think 20, 30 years ago, we were just pumping stuff out and creating stuff that was harmful to the planet. I mean, we're still doing it now, but the people that younger people are more passionate about protecting something because they understand it, because we understand what we're doing to the planet is wrong. And what we're doing as gardeners, we're not the innocent party here. We've been using peat for years. And that's only now starting to change. We sell our plant pots. We sell our plants in black plastic pots that can't be recycled. These are changes that have to be made. And I think younger people understand that more.
They do.
Or have been brought up with that understanding. So I think they're more interested in learning ways that they can do their own little bit and protect the environment. And I think also the connection between man and land is more understood now, or has been re-understood. I think actually when you look at the kind of fundamental practices that we're using now, they're the same practices that we were using 100, 200 years ago. And I think that kind of industrial revolution, it got lost a little bit. So actually going back, stopping and connecting with your land, whether that be your garden or your farm or the beach or the countryside, and understanding how you connect to the land, one can help you improve that local space, but also help improve your mental well-being. There's a fundamental connection between you touching the grass with your feet and feeling better. So, and all of those things are now understood by younger people. So I think that's really good. And I think in the next 20, 30 years, we're going to see some radical change in how we look after our own gardens and how they're perceived as well.
Yeah, I agree. And hopefully that movement continues to go in that direction.
I can't see that it won't.
No. And one thing that I really want to know, though, going back to your garden design, is I'm obsessed with as a creative person, I'm obsessed with the creative process. So when you start to work on a garden design project, what does that look like for you, and how do you visualize it? Because having spoken to a few different designers, everyone has their own style.
Yeah.
Some people love to draw, some people love the computerized graphics. What's your kind of go-to style? Well, being an artist, you must draw them, right? This way you're like, no, I hate
no. I
computer.
understand the need for computer-aided design, but I only use it because I have to.
Yeah.
So mine always starts with a piece of paper, usually when I'm with a client. So when I'm with a client and we're talking,
see that creative process.
We're creating our brief together. So what do they want in the garden? What spaces do they want to create? What feel do they want? I talk a lot about, when I'm with a client, about feel, like how do you want this to make you feel? Because I think that's the most important thing in any garden, is how does it make you feel? Do you want a space that's going to make you feel more relaxed? Do you want a space that's going to make you feel more invigorated? So that's how I start. And I'm usually, as they're talking, I'm sketching out kind of some ideas, and it's usually just shapes and kind of connecting lines. And then I kind of look at it and show the client it's usually just a bunch of scribbles and overlapping shapes. Then I usually take that back and just start refining those shapes and thinking about, especially really early, thinking about key plants that are going to make that work. I'm more interested in soft landscaping than hard landscaping. I think a garden's not a garden without plants. So
No.
I usually, by the end of our initial client brief meeting, I've got 2 or 3 plants that I know are going to be my kind of
Your core plants.
spine that are going to build off everything. Sometimes I get a bit obsessed with certain plants. They kind of go into every garden anyway. Cenolophium, I think, at the moment is my
Every
like
garden designer has a
every
few
garden's
plants
got
end
it.
up
It's
everywhere.
funny actually because I can usually date my gardens by the
What
plants
phase
that
you're
are in
in.
them. So there was a stage kind of 3 or 4 years ago where everything had fennel in.
Yeah.
And I was like,
love
that must be like a
fennel.
2021 garden because it's got
Yeah.
fennel. I still love fennel. I think it's a really undervalued plant actually. But yeah, drawing stuff out always. Then we have to put it into computer aided.
I guess you need the measurements and to know where
and
it actually all
also
fits.
it's easier to kind of it's a quicker process to show a client a 3D render, and also to kind of be able to walk them through a garden or make any changes.
Yeah, you don't want to have to
hand drawing
redraw
stuff
something
can
all
be a
over
real
again to
pain.
change one plant.
But I think as a somebody who is trained as an artist, actually you get your kind of arm leads itself in some way, and when there's a disconnect between the piece of paper and your hand, I think sometimes there's something lost in translation there. A computer will always want your curve to be kind of perfect.
Yeah.
But actually, sometimes you don't want
You
want
that
perfect.
to be perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So we always scan it in. We'll scan in the kind of drawing and then try and capture the spirit of that on a computer. But yeah, it's probably a longer process than it should be for me because I do multiple drawings, but I love drawing. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've not fully converted to computers.
No, I like that. And like you said, there are some bits that just can't be replaced, and especially when your whole background is in art, then that's
Yeah,
you definitely want to keep those roots.
I'm also not the most technically gifted.
Oh, really?
So also I think clients really like seeing stuff that's hand drawn. I think there's a connection there that they can understand a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's also building that relationship with you as the designer a little bit more rather than something from the computer.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's
you're
more of a
showing
soul
them.
to it. It sounds really naff, and
it's a personality to it.
yeah,
you're
I think
right.
you can really show. I mean, there's some people that do some amazing stuff with Photoshop specifically. Kind of photo collage now has become a real kind of trend, in especially presentational work. But I'm not good enough to do it. I don't have the skills, so I'll stick to kind of hand drawing over stuff.
So what's next for you over the next few years? Have you got a plan, or are you just rolling with it and seeing what happens?
Yeah, so we've got plenty of we're massively busy with private and kind of public jobs over the next year at least. We've got a busy show season next year. I'm not allowed.
What can I say?
I'm not allowed to say too much at the moment, but
I can expect to see you popping up at all the shows again next year.
Yeah, we'll be doing something.
Great. That's
I think
exciting.
we're trying to do something quite exciting. Hopefully at Malvern next year.
Great.
And then there's a couple of other things we're doing later in the year, which is really exciting. I think it's highlight of the year, and then just. We're working on some really interesting historical projects with
nice.
Charlie as well again, and that's always really fun working on historical projects and kind of bringing a new life to them. So yeah, I'm looking forward to another kind of bumper year of garden design and kind of helping people create gardens that they didn't think they could have, and kind of just again continue to kind of educate people in why they should do things. I think that's I want to try and impart. I think the passing of knowledge is probably the most important thing we can do as humans, and I think trying to pass on as much knowledge and educate people why they should do certain things and why it's important they should do certain things is what I'm most looking forward to.
Brilliant. Well, sounds like we are going to see you all over the place again next year then.
Fingers crossed.
I can't wait. Well, I better let you go and have a wander around Shrewsbury. Now the rain has stopped and the sun is finally coming back out again. yeah, I'll let you go and enjoy the show, but
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what you get up to next year.
Excellent.
And we'll catch up with you definitely at Malvern.
Yep.
And show everyone what you've been up to. And yeah, have a
Well,
great rest of the day.
Thank you
very
Tom.
much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.